Assalamu alaikum, sisters. You're tuned into Women's AM with myself, Adama, Liz and Hassana, and we've been discussing endometriosis on the show. And if you've missed our show, please be sure to catch the highlights on Sunday at 11 a.m. Now, we'll be going to our last segment of the show, her reviews. In this segment, we take a peek at various items for your interest, and today we'll be reviewing two different books from two very different authors. MashaAllah, we've got a good, interesting selection here, MashaAllah. We've got Just Your Average Muslim by Zia Chowdhury. If you could tell us a little bit more about what it's about, sister.
Yeah, so this is the book I've been reading this week, as you said, Just Your Average Muslim by Zia Chowdhury. It's an interesting book, actually. It starts off where he's kind of contextualising himself, talking about his family, how they came from Pakistan, and you know, how the Muslim community was kind of really developing in the 70s. And then he goes on to talk a little bit more in depth about kind of core issues within the religion, such as science versus religion, and then he goes on to talk a little bit about the Islamic history in terms of notable Muslim scientists and mathematicians, and what Muslims have brought to, you know, to these fields throughout history. And then again, towards the end, he kind of brings it back to his own experiences and talks about, you know, how we move forward with this information in terms of the current...
Yeah, and the importance of Muslim responsibility within a non-Muslim setting, within a very diverse community and society. I personally found the book quite witty. I think it was quite interesting that, you know, his personality came across, and it was quite interesting to see a little bit about history, a little history about the immigrant community of the sub-Indian continent, because I don't know actually a lot about that personally. So it's quite interesting to see his humble beginnings and how his father worked very hard to bring him and his siblings up, and the importance that they placed on education, which is something which he kind of reverberates through the book as we go through it as well. And his love of cars is something that he definitely brings through the book. He talks a little bit more about that. But it was quite interesting to see his personality through the book. I think in terms of the organisation of the chapters, for me, I thought maybe it could have been a little bit more smoother, because I think there were so many different aspects that he was drawing upon, isn't it?
Yeah, see, I found that as well. The first two chapters are very much anecdotal, talking about him and his, you know, childhood and education and that kind of thing. He talks, you know, some sort of very moving pages about the death of his father, which, you know, it's very, I found that very engaging. The next chapters are very, very heavy, very political, very, very scientific. I had to kind of read the sort of science chapter a couple of times to get my head around some of it. Some of the ideas, you know, they are very meaty, and so it was quite a shift from, you know, the first two chapters into that. But having said that, it was interesting. It was interesting stuff. And then the next chapter, which is talking about the kind of prominent Muslims of the past, this is something very that I found very interesting. And I think the point that he's making with this book is that, you know, we as Muslims, we need to kind of contextualise firstly our presence in Britain, but also our presence kind of on a world platform as well, in terms of what we've sort of brought to the table in the past. Where are we at now? Why is this the situation, and what is the way forward? So this is the general message of the book. You know, some things I kind of agreed with, some things I didn't agree with so much. The final chapter I think I had the most difficulty with, because it seemed to be talking a lot about Islam being reformed, Islam being updated, and he was very defensive to say, you know, obviously Islam is perfect and
egalitarian as well.
But you know, he was really just thinking about how do we apply this to, you know, 21st century Britain and America. But I think he wasn't bringing in so much of the seerah, bringing in so much of the sunnah. You know, he's talking about a lot of the things that are not there in the Quran, but actually we know they are found in other significant documents in Islam.
It was nonetheless a very interesting biography, and his opinions and thoughts come out through that.
Absolutely.
So one can appreciate that. So we'll move on to the next book, Sister Hassana.
A really interesting one. It's a book here which is by Brother Ajmal Masroor, and it's called 10 Things You Should Know About Marriage. It's a book which kind of separates into different chapters, and it goes through discussing exploring different concepts related to marriage, but also it's quite a different book because it has elements of activities in there. It's got tick boxes, it's got checklists, it's got advice, some fun, some humour, all added into the mix as well. I find it a really, really a beneficial book, and I think anyone who's looking to get married, it's quite a concise dip in to what marriage is all about. A nice
introduction, isn't it? If you're not
But
so
I think that's key. It's an introduction. I think if you're kind of looking for something a little bit deeper, a bit more meatier, then perhaps this is not for you. But I definitely think this is a good starting point for the discussion about the kind of things we should be looking for in our spouses. And Brother Ajmal, obviously we know that he's come from a background where he does relationship counselling, he does workshops and seminars on marriage. And I think, you know, obviously you can see his expertise in that. But I have to say, I was kind of surprised there wasn't more depth to some of the chapters. I did feel it was kind of skimming the surface sometimes, you know, particularly when talking about how you should build a relationship with your spouse's family. I kind of felt like he was telling me things I already knew. I mean, they're beneficial nonetheless. We all need a reminder. But I did want a little bit more in terms of some of the chapters.
It does depend on what you're looking for, isn't it? Because alhamdulillah, there's so many marriage courses out there and so much expertise going on around on YouTube as well, and so many different courses. So I think maybe a book like this, if you've already kind of gone down that road, maybe this doesn't necessarily come across as an addition to it. But as you said, mashallah, it is a great introduction if you're kind of sort of dipping into this sort of thing.
I have to say, I love the fact that he kind of put ayahs very regularly, and hadith, they're very regular within the course of the book. So there's always that constant reference back to what the Quran and Sunnah says, which is really, really important. You want those reminders, you know, as you're reading it. And, you know, what I found most moving was his story at the start, and he gave that, and he was very open and honest, and I found that to be really, really nice, you know, subhanAllah, for someone to be so open about their background.
Because it's a very difficult thing to come from, to say that, you know, I've gone through some sort of relationship issues before, but I'm moving on, and I actually want to educate other people.
And I want to share my story with you, because perhaps it might help you. I found that to be, you know, really sincere and genuine of him, and I did really like that about it. One thing I do want to mention, though, is I was a little bit confused with how the chapters are broken up, because I would think that the chapter about how you look for a spouse and what you should look for would be at the start, and then it would talk about marriage and what it means and compromise and all of those kind of things. But it's actually the opposite way around. The last chapter is how should you look for your spouse.
I mean, the chapters are quite concise, isn't it? And so maybe he felt I could put in any order. Maybe he wanted to be a bit controversial, even with the book. Maybe he wanted that. I mean, the types of chapters are quite interesting. So, for example, marriage is half of your religion, but he or she is not the other half. I thought was quite a sort of interesting, catchy phrase to get into, and a lot of the chapters are along the same lines as that as well. So, yeah, mashallah, quite interesting read, alhamdulillah, by somebody who's very reputable in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend it.
Definitely.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Well, we've almost come to the end of the show, but before that, here is another reminder of the competition we have in store for you this week.
This week on Women's AM, we are holding an exciting competition for you sisters out there. Up for grabs is a year's subscription for a sisters magazine. To be in with a chance to win this fabulous goodie, all you have to do is answer the following question. Which is the shortest surah in the Quran? A. Surah Al-Kawthar. B. Surah Tawbah. C. Surah Al-Fatiha. D. Surah Al-Nas. To enter, email your answer A, B, C or D to womensam@islamchannel.tv, along with your name and address and what you most like about Women's AM. The deadline for the entry is Friday the 18th of April 2014 at 4 p.m. All applicants need to be over 18 and residing in the UK. Please note, only one entry per person per household. A winner will be randomly selected from all correct entries, so get entering.
So do send in your entries before the closing date, inshallah. I leave you with an inspiring quote on leadership that I pray to Allah we can all implement. A leader is like a shepherd. He stays behind the flock, letting the most nimble go out ahead, whereupon the others follow, not realising that all along they're being directed from behind. And this quote is from the late Nelson Mandela. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you for watching as well. From all of us here at Women's AM, have a great weekend. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.